Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal the latest upheaval in Port Charles didn't erupt from an explosion, a kidnapping, or even another clandestine coup within the WSB. It came, rather, from something far more haunting, a name long believed to have been buried beneath the cold, final stillness of death, Britt. Her return, if it can be called that, came not with an announcement nor a physical form, but as a whispered storm. An eerie cascade of scattered clues dropped by a man no one could quite place. A stranger, wrapped in a shroud of ambiguity, surfaced like a ghost from the abyss, his dark, unreadable eyes and erratic yet deliberate movements casting shadows across the fragile peace of Port Charles. He didn't speak much, but his presence said enough. He hovered at Metro Court with the stillness of a predator, watchful, patient, lingering near the very poolside where echoes of past secrets still clung to the air. But it wasn't until he appeared beside Jason Morgan on a flight Jason never imagined would become a turning point in his life that alarm bells truly began to toll. Jason said nothing, but something shifted in his gaze, a flicker of dread laced with a spark of impossible hope. It wasn't suspicion of the man himself that troubled him. It was the instinct, the visceral, inexplicable sensation that Britt, the woman he had once tried and failed to save, might still be breathing somewhere in the shadows. The world had long accepted her death, and the medical reports corroborated the tragedy. But the atmosphere in Port Charles was telling a different story. It was bleeding anew, as if an old wound had reopened without warning, and at the center of it all was a name Jason had never truly let go of, Britt. The stranger wasn't simply wandering. His movements were too precise, too timed. One moment he was watching from the glass balconies of Metro Court, the next, he was within earshot of Liesl Albrecht as she exchanged sharp, urgent words with Dante and Lulu by the pool. These were not coincidences. They were the footsteps of a design long in the making. Liesl, once the architect of so many of Port Charles's darkest chapters, remained oblivious to the fact that the sins of her past were stirring, clawing their way back into relevance. If Britt were truly alive, it meant the secrets she had buried alongside her own name, secrets linked directly to her monstrous father, Caesar Faison, were no longer safely hidden. Faison's legacy, thought extinguished, may have been waiting all this time to return in new, more twisted forms. And the stranger could be that form, either one of Faison's remaining disciples or a newly minted puppet carrying forward a forgotten directive, now ready to swallow Port Charles whole from the inside out. Jason, ever the silent sentinel, found himself being pulled deeper into the spiral. His demons had never left him, but now they gained shape and voice. The memories of Britt, once sacred and sealed, now bled through the cracks of his focus, threatening to undo the careful stoicism he had built in her absence. This wasn't a mission of vengeance or justice. It was personal. His pursuit was not born of violence, but of instinct, the aching, unshakable pull of someone who once lost the woman he loved and never forgave himself for it. Britt had always been clever enough to fake her own death if it meant shielding those she loved from a fate worse than hers. That idea, wild, irrational, but curiously plausible, latched onto Jason's mind and would not let go. Carly, forever Jason's anchor when reason escaped him, was the first to see it too. At first, she resisted the theory. Britt was dead, buried by circumstance and danger. But the mounting coincidences, the stranger's eerie familiarity, the subtle familiarity in his gaze, the way he moved through Port Charles as if retracing paths he knew too well, it all screamed of design, not chance. Carly, hardened by years of survival and betrayal, wasn't one to believe in miracles. But even she couldn't deny that something impossible was unfolding. And if there was even the slimmest chance Britt had orchestrated her own disappearance, Carly knew Jason would not rest until he unearthed the truth, no matter how dangerous it became. Unbeknownst to them, Liesl continued on, unaware that her daughter might be watching everything from afar. The stranger, far from being a rogue agent, might be Britt's chosen shadow, her silent emissary in a world she could no longer touch directly. Or worse, he could be an opportunist exploiting the lingering dread of Faison's name to destabilize the lives Britt once fought to protect. The lines blurred between protector and predator, between messenger and manipulator. In a town already poisoned by secrets and vendettas, his mere existence threatened to awaken a horror too long suppressed. Because Brit's ghost was not a gentle echo of a life lost. It was a razor-sharp memory shaped by love, regret, and inherited destruction. She was the daughter of Phazon, born into madness, shaped by betrayal, and tempered by rare moments of genuine love. Her death had been mourned, her sins weighed, and her legacy catalogued. But if she was still alive, then every assumption, every resolution the town had made in her absence, crumbled into dust. And if the stranger was truly her harbinger, then the past was not just returning, it was mutating, becoming something darker and more dangerous than anyone had foreseen. Jason could feel the walls closing in. Dante had started asking questions. Lulu felt a chill in her bones that had nothing to do with the summer breeze. Even Brad, Brit's closest friend and confidant, received an anonymous envelope containing an old photo, one he knew for a fact had been in Brit's possession and nowhere else. Every new clue drove home the same gut-wrenching truth: someone, somewhere, was sending a message, and it was time someone finally listened. There was no more room for doubt. Port Charles stood on the edge of an unraveling tapestry. The stranger's movements, his cryptic silence, and his calculated presence were unraveling everything, slowly, deliberately, without mercy. Liesl's crimes, once buried beneath the layers of redemption and reinvention, threatened to explode back into relevance. Carly's determination to protect Jason put her on a direct collision course with a nightmare they couldn't yet name. And Jason, caught between the memory of a woman he once loved and the fear of what she may have become, could no longer look away. If Brit was alive, she wasn't coming back to be saved, she might be returning to finish what her father started. Or maybe, just maybe, she had never left at all, merely reshaped herself into something new, unseen, and deeply necessary. Whether as guardian or executioner, savior or villain, Brit's legacy was awakening, and the man with no name was only the beginning. Port Charles would soon discover that the dead never stay buried, and love, no matter how desperate, never truly dies. It waits, sometimes in silence, sometimes in shadow, until the perfect moment to strike. Brit was never merely a victim, she was the consequence of a social experiment that had festered in the heart of Port Charles for years, the living embodiment of a warped legacy carved from betrayal, secrecy, and trauma. She was born in sin, molded in deception, hardened by abandonment, and finally learned to love through pain that never truly healed. Every step of her life was orchestrated or derailed by forces far beyond her control: her notorious father Caesar Phazon's manipulative obsession with power, her mother Liesl Albrecht's morally fluid ambitions, and the ceaseless judgment of a town that never quite knew what to make of her. Yet even in the shadows of her fractured origin, Brit carved out a humanity all her own, flawed, defiant, desperate for redemption, and ultimately undone by a death that always felt more like a vanishing act than a true goodbye. But what if that death wasn't the end? What if it was simply the smokescreen for something greater, a plan she crafted in secret, rooted in survival, vengeance, or something even darker? If Brit had indeed faked her death, then the quiet return of her influence, either directly or through the mysterious man now stalking Port Charles, would be nothing short of a seismic event. Not just a disruption, but a full detonation that could obliterate what little balance remained in a town still recovering from years of blood-soaked betrayals. And for those closest to her, the fallout was already beginning. Brad Cooper, the last person who could truly call himself Brit's friend without qualification, had long struggled to let go of her memory. Their bond had been forged in scandal but tempered by unwavering loyalty. So when a plain envelope arrived on his doorstep, no return address, no markings beyond the wax seal, his world began to tilt. Inside, a single photograph, a candid, intimate moment of Brit and Brad, smiling beside each other in a place no one else had access to. The photo wasn't just a relic, it was a message. Someone was out there, someone who had been with Brit, perhaps still was. And Brad knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that no one but Brit herself could have sent it. With each passing day, the presence of the unknown man in Port Charles grew more oppressive. He wasn't just haunting the fringes, he was drawing closer, not to people, but to pressure points. Appearing in corridors, at familiar landmarks, near conversations that should have been private. His silence screamed of calculation. His gaze lingered with intent. The authorities still lacked a name or motive, but his impact was unmistakable. He wasn't watching aimlessly, he was waiting for something. Detective Dante Falconeri had begun piecing together threads. Flight manifests. Surveillance glitches. Cross-referenced facial scans. But each time he got close, the answers slipped through his fingers like water. Lulu, meanwhile, wrestled with a rising dread she couldn't articulate. The past had never truly let her go, and now it seemed to be creeping up behind her again, wearing a face they didn't recognize and carrying the echo of a name they thought they'd buried. Even young Rocco noticed the shift, especially in Liesl Albrecht, who had grown strangely distracted, as though haunted by the distant whisper of her daughter's voice in the back of her mind. There was something in Liesl's eyes now, a subtle widening, a flicker of recognition cloaked in terror. She had seen this pattern before. It was the rhythm of Britt's careful manipulation, the exact cadence of a plan unfolding behind a curtain of chaos. And then, the bombshell came, not with a shout, but as a quiet, terrifying discovery within a trove of hacked WSB data. Amongst deleted files and misfiled logs was a low-resolution photograph recovered from a corrupted drive. The image was blurred, but not enough to hide what truly mattered. A woman walking away from the camera, her back to the lens, her figure unmistakable in posture and gait. But what turned that image from eerie to earth-shattering was the watch on her wrist, a very specific, engraved timepiece, custom-made, once belonging to Jason Morgan. A gift he had given Britt when he had no words to express what she meant to him. That watch had never been found after her death. And now it was on the wrist of a woman walking through a heavily secured corridor in Zurich. Months after Britt had supposedly died. It was no longer a question of if Britt was alive, it was how long she had been pulling strings from behind the veil. Had she been orchestrating every step of the chaos now blooming across Port Charles? Was the mysterious man her protector, her proxy, or her puppet? Had she been forced underground, or had she chosen to disappear? Had she aligned herself with remnants of Faison's empire, or was she determined to dismantle them from within? One thing became certain, Britt's ghost was no longer a fading memory. It was a presence, vivid, calculating, and on the verge of revealing itself. And Port Charles, teetering on the edge of its own instability, was ill-prepared for what came next. Because if Brit Westborne had returned, whether in body or in will, she would not be seeking reconciliation. She would be seeking completion, of a mission, a reckoning, or perhaps a form of justice only she could define. And the town that once failed to understand her might now be forced to kneel before the storm she became. Port Charles was once a town that thrived on illusion, the illusion of safety, of second chances, of justice served in sins buried beneath layers of time and silence. But that illusion has begun to crack, and what lies beneath is something far more dangerous, a legacy of unpunished sins clawing their way back to the surface, demanding reckoning in blood. The air feels heavier now, laced with tension too sharp to ignore. Shadows cling longer to corners, and whispers carry further than they should. There is no sanctuary left, not in the back rooms of the Metro Court, nor in the offices of General Hospital, nor even within the protective reach of the WSB. Port Charles is no longer a safe place, it is a battlefield of secrets that have festered too long in the dark. And at the center of that battlefield is a name once mourned, now feared. Brit Westborne. If she is truly alive, she is not returning to forgive or to be forgiven. She is coming back to finish what was started long ago, perhaps by her monstrous father, perhaps by a force even older, deeper, and more destructive than either of them. Her resurrection, if real, is not a miracle. It is a storm. And the man who trails her shadow, the stranger whose mere presence unravels the delicate web of complacency in Port Charles, may be more than just a harbinger. He may be her weapon, her executioner, or worse, her mirror. Is he clearing the path for her return, or has he already begun carrying out a plan forged in grief and fury, sharpened by years in hiding, and finally loosed upon a town that never saw it coming? The questions that once lingered in whispered speculation are now converging into a single, searing point of impact. Who knows the truth? Who hid it? Who profited from it? And who will pay the ultimate price for their silence? The deeper this mystery is dug, the more it becomes clear, the only way out is through. Those who were once complicit, whether knowingly or unknowingly, can no longer shield themselves behind half-truths or carefully curated guilt. The reckoning has arrived. There is no longer space for half-measures or double games. Liesl Albrecht, who spent years manipulating life and death in the name of science, survival, or something more selfish, must now confront the monstrous consequences of the choices she once dismissed as necessary. Her daughter, if she truly walks among the living again, is not the same woman she lost. She may have returned scarred, hardened, and determined to make others feel the weight of every betrayal she once bore in silence. Liesl's redemption arc is no longer in her control. It lies in Brit's hands now, and those hands may very well be clenched into fists. Jason Morgan, ever the quiet guardian, is now face to face with the pain he has refused to name. He has carried the loss of Brit like an unspoken scar across his soul, never acknowledging it aloud, never allowing himself the space to grieve. But if she has returned, then every wall he built to contain that pain is meaningless. He will have to confront not just the possibility of her survival, but the truth of what her absence turned him into. If she's alive, what does that make him? A fool, a coward, a failure? Or is he now the only one who can stop her before her vengeance consumes not only her enemies but also herself? Carly Corinthos, torn as ever between fierce loyalty and razor-sharp instinct, stands at a precipice of her own. She has spent years protecting those she loves, even from themselves, often at great personal cost. But now she faces a choice no one can make for her, to trust that the woman she once saw as a reluctant ally is still reachable beneath the storm, or to prepare for war against someone who may have become something else entirely. Trust is a luxury Carly can no longer afford. Protection may require sacrifice. And her loyalty to Jason will be tested like never before. But perhaps the cruelest burden of all rests with Brit herself. If she still breathes, she is no longer merely a survivor. She is the inheritor of a bloodline built on terror, deception, and dominance. Faison's legacy was always a curse disguised as power, and Brit has spent her entire life trying to escape it. Now, faced with the ruins of everything she once tried to protect, she must make an impossible choice, to destroy the empire that birthed her, or to embrace it once and for all. To sever the cycle of suffering, or to become its next vessel. There is no middle path left. Everything is building toward an irreversible moment. The line between the past and present is blurring, and what once seemed dead and gone is now returning, not as memory, but as active force. Port Charles is being pulled backward into the dark heart of its own history, a history soaked in secrets, in blood, in ghosts that were never truly laid to rest. And when that past finishes waking up, there will be no room left for comfort or denial, only confrontation. The reckoning is not coming. It is here. The dead don't sleep in Port Charles. They evolve, they plot, and sometimes, they come back, not as victims, but as the storm. And so, as dusk quietly folds over the troubled skyline of Port Charles, a suffocating stillness descends, not of peace, but of expectation, of breath collectively held, of fate tightening its grip. The storm does not come with thunder or flame, but in the slow, deliberate echo of footsteps from the past reclaiming their place in the present. This is no longer a town simply haunted by memory, it is a place cornered by the reckoning it tried to delay for too long. Brit Westborne was once seen as collateral damage in a life defined by betrayal and bloodlines, a woman molded by the sins of others but desperate to carve out an identity separate from the shadows. And yet, she now looms larger than ever, no longer just a daughter of Faison or a casualty of espionage, but as a force in her own right, resurrected by whispers, sharpened by silence, and weaponized by time. If she still lives, and all signs point to the cruel, miraculous truth that she does, then her return is not some sentimental resurrection. It is a reckoning. Brit was born of fire and deception, and if she has emerged from that death with purpose, then it is not to be pitied or mourned. It is to be feared, understood, and faced. The man trailing her shadow, silent, surgical, unwavering, is more than a mystery. He is the first movement in a symphony of justice long delayed. Whether he is an agent of her vengeance or her protector in the final act of a long-forgotten war, his presence has already infected the town. Port Charles has begun to tremble under the weight of what it knows but refuses to say. The photos sent to Brad, the watch on the woman's wrist in the WSB leak, the chilling familiarity in the eyes of a stranger, all these fragments are no longer clues. They are warnings. Warnings that the rules have changed. That there is no safe harbor left for the complicit. That the clock has started on truths buried in the name of self-preservation. Every major figure in Brit's life, every protector, betrayer, and survivor, now finds themselves standing on shifting ground. Liesl, for all her cruelty softened by years of attempted penance, must now look in the mirror and confront the daughter she helped forge in the image of a monster.